our traditions brought from the motherland here to the Americas over time have become so deeply meshed together that it is difficult for some of us to even begin to separate what is us and what is Christian, or what is Western, or what is Islamic, or what is of some culture or understanding outside of us. Even when I look at my past incarnation as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Rasta, many of the practices and things that we consider to be traditional to who we are and what our culture is and what our lifestyle is directly go back to Voodoo, directly go back to West Africa and our indigenous cultural practices and traditions. But the knowledge of the archetypes that go along with these practices and these traditions have been crushed, sometimes disguised, masked, but in many ways completely just crushed, completely eliminated altogether. While it is true that Africans do not have a word equivalent to the term religion, there are a number of terms in African languages that describe activities, practices, and systems of thought that correspond to what we now identify as religion. So when we talk about, well, what is your religion? I get asked that a lot, by the way, particularly when I'm out in public and people see various garb or various jewelry, implements. Well, what is your religion? Sometimes, they think I'm a Muslim, they think I'm a Rasta. I don't think I've ever had anyone to assume I was Voodoo, ever, unless I'm not remembering it. But right now, I don't think anyone has ever assumed that on just meeting me. Now, in contrast, it's assumed when people pass my house, but there are things that are visible on my house that represent the tradition. But when you see me out, you might even see me with the Ilekis on. Most people are going to identify that with Santeria, Ifa, Lakomi. I still don't get, are you Voodoo? So much of what is Voodoo is so well masked behind other cultural traditions that most people don't even know what that is. And that's why the importance of initiating and committing to an initiatory process is paramount. It's paramount. We are losing the gifts. We are losing the archive of information because of our Western sensibility to power, control, and authority. And many of us are just not willing to submit, to sit down long enough to do what is necessary to gain access to the knowledge, the mystery systems, if you will, of our own traditional indigenous practices and systems. And I like the words or the phrase mystery systems, because it really gives you in wholeness what this really is. It's not a secret society, if you will. It's not some hidden cult. It's a mystery system. So when you see the images, when you hear the language, when you hear the rhythms, many of you don't realize that when I'm videotaping Congo Square and you're hearing sound and you're seeing movement, there's a code language going on there. That's not accidental. We don't just all sort of come together in hippie style and just sort of do what we do. There's names to those movements. There's names to those rhythms. There are names to those dances. And there is a purpose for them. When we talk about indigenous, traditional African American, indigenous spiritual practice and religion, we also must look at art, implements, things that we use every day. When we go back to the continent The concept of creating art for tourists is new. Creating drums, creating things that look pretty to be sold, that is a relatively new concept. Traditionally speaking, we didn't create things unless they had a purpose. Now, yes, it's a bowl, it has a purpose, and we want to beautify it, so we would make a nice looking bowl. It would have aesthetically pleasing characteristics, but more importantly is the usage. So often, even the decoration had a usage, whether it was counting time, whether it was a calendar, whether it was a recipe, whether it was a song, whether it was some other coded message. So mystery system, for me, really gives weight to what these various practices and traditions are. They're a mystery until you've been enlightened in them and of them. So we can record verbatim, but even in your recording, if you don't have the instruction of what the symbolism is, what the codex is, if you will, the real true message is lost on you. So in keeping with bastardization of traditional and indigenous African American spirituality and religion, that is an important point to make and to understand. A common argument that I have with people, in fact, one of my featured shows, it might be the show that's featured right now, me and a local have a healthy debate, argument about that very thing, about the survival of our traditions and our practices, and then this whole modern thing of finance. You got to pay for water. And water is very expensive in New Orleans, by the way. You got to pay for water. You got to pay for electricity. Our water bill is often higher than our electricity bill, if that gives you some idea. Naturally, we don't have the winters Chicago has, New York has, so we don't have gas, but we have electricity and other energy-related bills and costs. When you're talking about running a ministry, a temple, even a church, you're still talking about power, electricity, however you heat, however you cool, property tax, upkeep of the land, the grass, the shrubbery, all those things that go along with that. But then when you talk about our traditions, and you start talking about implements, you start talking about pots, taurines, altars, other various ritual items that we use within the tradition. But then you talk about, how do you get that? Do you buy it? Do you acquire it? You start mixing our tradition with westernized ideas of value, money, cost, expense. Another small pet peeve of mine is when I get the email, I'm interested in a reading, I'm interested in initiating even deeper. How much is that? That's a very Western retail way of looking at what is really a education, a training, an apprenticeship, if you will. What you want, what you're coming to get, what you're coming to commit to, may not be what the next person was willing to commit to. You may not be willing to commit to more than one deity. You may not be willing to commit to more than one path. You may not be willing to commit to learning a language, a new language, Fan, Akan, Yoruba, etc. So we're in a very dangerous territory in terms of bastardizing of our traditions when we don't consider the language that we are using because we understand, and then applying that to what we're talking about, which is a traditional, indigenous, natural experience. I can give you a list of herbs, I can give you a list of items. How do you put those together? What do you say while you're doing that? What are you supposed to feel while you're doing that? What should you be focused in on while you're doing that? What should the other people around you be saying? What kind of protective measures might be necessary to lay down while you're doing that in the process? What should be going on outside the house while a particular ceremony, ritual, practice, cleansing is going on inside the house? Who should be allowed to witness that? At what point should others be allowed to come into that? What do you do with the remaining product after you do that? There's such a depth of other coded information that comes with that picture, that text, your question. So sometimes when I get the requests, I almost always respond. Let me be clear. And I don't think there's anyone out there who will tell you I have never responded to them. But it takes a little prayer, a little thought for me to decide how to respond to people. What is your agenda? What's your true purpose? Because sometimes we aren't clear about what that is. You yourself, you aren't always clear about what that is. But I have to consider time, especially right now, in terms of getting all my ceremonies done, getting my rituals done, keeping up with this Hollywood of the South movie industry scheduling, which usually has us up at 3 in the morning, on set by 4:30, 5:30 in the morning. I have to be very clear about my time and how I utilize that to its best advantage. So if I just spent the day answering Facebook questions, I would never get anything done. And then a great deal of you who are asking me these questions don't really care about the answer. Not the way I do as I'm writing out your response. Not the way others do who have deeply committed to these traditions. And some of the things you're asking me, we know is a shortcut to getting access to the information so that you can use it inappropriately. There are certain things that you only gain through experience, through actual doing, through actual participation. And that reminds me too, before I run out of time, I do have some local announcements that I did want to make. One, from Sula the Doula, mark your calendar, Sunday, January 5th at noon, January 5th, 2014, 2014, at 12 noon at the river, Nizia Doula Collective's Village will have their cleansing ceremony, honoring our elders, honoring our beloved Nana Abriwa. Some of you are familiar with the video that I did with me and Nana Abriwa talking about the effect that she had gotten from a healing procedure that I had done on her, which is on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Voodoo Tide. But this will be a healing ceremony, healing, cleansing ceremony for us all while honoring our elders, honoring Nana Abriwa, and the collective work of Nzaya Doula Collective. We're asking that you bring children, bring your families, bring your elders, bring yourselves, as well as your offerings. And the offerings that Sula is asking specifically for this event is one, that you wear white, but that you also bring offerings of melons, oranges, flowers, and things that we would offer to the elders, the ancestors, but also utilize in the cleansing. And generally speaking, we ask that you wear white to these events. Another announcement I wanted to make was for Priestess Sable Apatabi, Priestess Warrior, in the Third Eye debut of a production called Women in Spiritual Revolt. She is the warrior priestess in this production by Third Eye Theater called Women in Spiritual Revolt, the Haitian Revolution, A Dance for Life, 2013. I'm not quite sure of the date of the performance. I actually don't have it in front of me right now. I thought I did. But when I have access to it, I'll come back and repost that. She also wanted to announce December 14th they're having a Obatala ceremony. So if you're local, if you will be local, if you're interested, please do get in contact with me or Sable Akpatabi about those events. I will be forward with more Blog Talk Radio, Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo secrets and recipes momentarily. All is truly and indeed a blessing.